What's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3. It is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, and we got another big game for the number one ranked Oregon Ducks this week as they hit the road out to Madison to face the Wisconsin Badgers. That game on Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and it will be broadcast on NBC. And we also got some big recruiting news to hit on as the Ducks picked up a commitment from 2025 tight end Vander Ploog, who flipped his pledge from the Washington Huskies to the Oregon Ducks on Sunday afternoon. So all of that and much more recruiting. And joining me to break it all down is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, good morning.
Morning. Glad to be back. Obviously, I'm not at my normal spot at home, but able to make the pod just the same. So glad to chop it up and talk a little recruiting.
Definitely. It's getting to be that time. Every day we're getting closer and closer to not just the early signing period for the 2025 class, but also transfer portal. Transfer portal is going to get jumping here with every game. It feels like we're getting closer and closer to, guys jumping ship or, figuring out that they just want to have a better situation. So we will have all of that covered for you guys over at scoopduck.com. So come and see us, come check us out. If you haven't already, we have so much coverage going on over there. And we'll get into some more 2025 recruiting later on in this episode and just plenty to talk about. So it's certainly a fun time right now as Dan Lane and the Ducks are killing it on the field and finally got some recruiting to talk about. So let's get into it, Justin. Vander Ploog announces on Sunday that he's going to be flipping his commitment from the Washington Huskies to the Oregon Ducks. I know a lot of Oregon fans just love hearing that sentence alone. Washington's loss is Oregon's gain directly in this situation. But really, it comes down to Oregon stayed in the mix here. They got him on campus twice in the month of October, once for an unofficial visit for the Ohio State game, and they brought him back at the very next home game just 2 weeks later for an official visit with his family. Knocked it out of the park. He told me, quote, that his heart just kept coming back to Oregon. I'll get into some more of that later, but just a really good pickup for Oregon. And I think it could end up being maybe a little bit of an underrated one. Not saying he's not properly rated or ranked or anything like that, but just not a guy out west that many people were talking about really until late spring, getting into the summer and the football season. So what do you think about this pickup?
Yeah, he's a multi-sport kid. I always like the multi-sport kids. Really good athlete. Kid moves really well for a guy his size. You wouldn't know that he's 6'5" or 6'6" or whatever he, is currently listed at with the way he moves. So you've got to like that. And I think part of, maybe the lack of recognition for him is the fact that he goes to Troy, and no slight to Troy, but he's not at Mater Dei. He's not at Bosco. He's not at, one of the powerhouse schools that maybe gets a little bit more recognition than Troy does. So, I think those are a couple of things, but still you're looking at a guy that's a top 250 guy. He's not Kenyon Sadiq. He's different, but he is also just, very athletic, sneaky athletic. And what I do like is that Oregon recruited him in the spring, maybe didn't quite push as hard as they could have, but then, kept an eye on him in the fall here and really, realized after watching his senior film that, hey, this is a guy that helps us. This is the guys that we want. I guess if we're sitting in a room with Dan Lanning, he probably felt like, Washington wasn't much of a threat in terms of keeping him committed if Oregon pushed there. And that proved to be the case. So big position of need. You and I both know that. Most Oregon fans know that. And at this point, if Oregon is able to either get one of Lincoln Cure or Andrew Olish with Vander Ploog, that's a really good tight end class and just about what you would have asked for back in the spring. So it kind of took the long road to get there, but there is potential for it to, for Drew Maringer to come away with a really good class.
Speaking on the long road aspect of it, Justin, this is just another example of how there's ebbs and flows with recruiting. That the Ducks had a tight end in the fold earlier this cycle back in June when Deshaun Brame committed to the Ducks, but turned out to be a short-lived pledge for one of the best prospects in Kansas as he flipped his pledge to Tennessee. So Oregon, I think you just got to make sure you keep an eye and, keep guys warm, keep an eye on the best players that are closer to you And that certainly is the case here with Vander Ploog being one of the top playmakers in Southern California. I did get to see Ploog at his game a couple weeks ago when the Warriors, I think is their mascot, but Troy won the league title for the first time in 20 years. So that was a pretty special moment to be there for. As for that game, when I saw Ploog, he definitely had some nice plays, but it was very much a run-heavy night for the offense because he was doubled all night, and they found ways to get him the ball, lots of sweeps, reverses, that kind of a thing. But he was just, you could tell, it was like one of those fields, like, can you spot the D1 guy? And it was very clearly Vander Ploog, who's every bit of 6'6", plays basketball, plays baseball. You always want to get those guys that can do a little bit of everything in your program. So just an awesome kid too. Every time I've gotten to interview him, he's been super gracious with his time. Before the game, he came over and said what's up to me, thanks for coming, that kind of a deal. So definitely a high character guy as well. But yeah, I think that this is a great ad for Dan Lanning and Drew Maringer at the tight end spot. Someone who I think can become a pretty talented player in this Oregon offense, but I don't necessarily see him as someone seeing the field right away. But there's a lot of time between now and his freshman season. He's going to be enrolling early at Oregon, so pretty special that he took that visit in late October, and then he got back to Washington. I'm assuming that was their kind of last chance, Hail Mary, to hang on to him, but we all know that he ended up committing to Oregon, so pretty wild. He committed to Oregon, and now he's going to be on campus in just over a month as an early enrollee. So life comes at you fast, and I think that's going to continue to be the case as Oregon nears the finish line here in the 2025 recruiting cycle.
Yeah, and it's not a panic ad for Oregon. It's the guy they wanted, and like you said, we're getting close to that finish line. So now it's about kind of pulling in the pieces together. There's obviously a really good base of a class there, but again, we talk about tight end; it's a position in need. We talk about linebacker; that's a position in need. And I know we'll get to that in a little bit. This is what Dan Lanning does. He looks at the roster, he looks at the recruiting class, and identifies where they need to get better, and then they go and find dudes and make their class better and more complete. So that's exactly what Ploog adds here.
Another little dimension of this recruitment and of this commitment, I guess you could say, I got a chance to talk to Troy's head coach, Michael E. Chavez, after that win for Troy. And it just got to kind of pick his brain about Vander Ploog and what he thinks about him, what he brings to the table, that kind of a thing. And I asked him what he thought Ploog's best trait was. And he said it was his resilience, which I thought was awesome. I'm looking up the quote right now. You can read the full story, my interview with Chavez over on ScoopDuck. He said, definitely his resilience. I mean, that guy, he does things in kind of, he was like trying to find the words. He shocks himself because he just keeps getting better and better and better and better. And it's because he works so hard. He thinks about it so much. He's always humble enough to take advice and criticism and build on it and get better. So definitely his resilience. And this was definitely a program kind of guy, a culture guy for Chavez during his 4 years at Troy. So I think that you could maybe say that Ploog's a bit of a project, but I think he's a prospect with tremendous upside at Oregon. He's coming to Oregon with a great head on his shoulders and ready to do the work. And I think the last thing that I'll maybe add about this one, Justin, is when he was kind of wrestling with his decision, he said, I can go be the guy at Washington, or I can go bet on myself and go to Oregon. And I thought that was a really cool part of his story, because being able to add him, I think, also speaks to Dan Lanning's culture and what he's building at Oregon, because getting all these guys on the same team is great, but you got to have them buy into the vision. And I think that his commitment to Oregon just shows that he's buying into what Dan Lanning is building at Oregon, and he wants to be a part of it.
Well, and he probably believes in the product on the field and having a chance to win a national championship, because not even rivalry aside, obviously UW is currently a long ways off from that under Jed Fish year one, where Oregon is obviously 10-0 and really competing there. So, you look at that, and that's probably a big part that entered the mix as well. And, the stability at quarterback, Dylan Gabriel's playing good ball. Obviously, Terrence Ferguson's getting his. Kenyon Sadiq is getting his. So, you look at the way Oregon's using their tight ends, and you see an opportunity there. So, just an all-around great pickup for Oregon, and they keep building that class.
Just to wrap up the Ploog talk here, From a rating standpoint, he is rated a 4-star according to On3 at 91, the number 153 player nationally, the number 8 tight end in the country, and the number 10 prospect in the state of California, and right around 6'6", 215 pounds. So this is a great ad for Oregon. They check a box at tight end in the 2025 class. We know, of course, Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert won't be on the team next year as they exhaust their college eligibility. But now, Justin, the question becomes, what's next? Not only in the 2025 class, but more specifically here in the tight end room for Drew Maringer. And one of the developments over the weekend was that they were supposed to host elite Kansas State tight end commit Lincoln Cure for a visit in Eugene, but Mother Nature had other plans, as the main highway, I believe it's I-70 out there between Kansas and Colorado, was snowed in essentially and closed. So just to give a little bit of backstory here, Cure has to fly out of Denver to go to Eugene. So that trip ultimately didn't happen. But I spoke with him earlier this week. I think it was actually on Sunday, and got a little interview with him over on ScoopDuck. So make sure you guys read that for the full quotes. Looks like he's trying to reschedule that trip. And the best opportunity, it sounds like, is for him to come back to Washington, for the Washington game. That is, of course, on November 30th for what would likely be his final trip in his recruitment process, because it looks like he's going to be making a decision during that early signing period window, December 4th to December 6th. And Justin, he's supposed to be back on campus in Manhattan this weekend for the Arizona State game. But I titled the story what I think the vibe of this recruitment is. Oregon's chances for Cure are still alive, but that trip to Eugene, him getting there, is going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, I got to get him there. I mean, we said that ahead of this game and this visit before it got postponed, if you will. Got to get him on campus to give yourself a chance. So I think, Oregon knows that. And I think it says a lot that Cure seems to be willing to do that, right? I mean, he's obviously wasn't able to make this trip, which he had planned. And they, quickly moved to the Washington game to get him on campus. And obviously he's willing to do that. So that shows you that the interest is sincere, and he's not just trying to take a free trip because, that gets around the Thanksgiving weekend. And let's be real, it'd probably be nicer for him to just be home and relax and see family and have Thanksgiving. But instead he's going to take this trip. So I kind of think like feel like it might be a blessing in disguise for Oregon to have him come for that Washington game, because no matter where Oregon's ranked and where Washington is ranked, that's going to be a very feisty crowd and a very live environment. So him getting to experience that might be a little better than the Maryland experience. I mean, obviously that was just kind of a weird game. I recognize that's in hindsight, but I think even before we could say, hey, look, Washington's probably going to be a more hostile, lively environment at Autzen Stadium than Maryland is. So should work out there. And again, this is one you just keep chipping away at. I mean, yeah, on the surface, you say it's Oregon versus K-State. Oregon should win 10 out of 10 times, but it's a local kid. K-State's poured a ton of resources into his recruitment. And just like we talked about with Vander Ploog, obviously Cure could go to K-State and be the guy. He's going to go there, and he would definitely be the guy. He'd probably see 8, 9, 10 targets a game. But at Oregon, you're going to go and obviously have a chance to, be a really good player in a really good offense and compete for a national championship. So, two different selling points there. And it's just going to come down, honestly, at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to distance, because that was what was the hurdle the first time around when Oregon was the runner up. And that's really going to be the hurdle this time around as well.
And the other thing I'll add here with Cure is that he was planning to make that trip to Eugene by himself this past weekend. And then after interviewing him and speaking with him, it seems like that's probably going to be the approach again if he does, in fact, make it out for that trip for the Washington game. So it's kind of crazy. I don't want to say it entirely hinges on him coming out to Oregon for that visit, but man, if he gets to Eugene, the staff has to feel pretty good about their chances to ultimately pull that one off. So definitely a unique element of this recruitment that he kind of wants to make the decision himself. It feels like go out there to Eugene and just kind of take it in. He told me he's going to be looking for that feeling. He's been a guy that said, when you know, kind of likens it, I think, reminds me of him on his K-State official. He went into the stadium and kind of had a little soul-searching moment and then decided to make that decision. So I think for Oregon, with a guy like Lincoln Cure, you feel good that you are pushing for the flip instead of trying to hang on to him down here in the 11th hour, if you will. Which is, I think I could explain that a bit more, but like that's the way I kind of feel about this recruitment, because they put in so much work. He's been multiple times, and I think that they still have a pretty solid shot here. They're still very much alive in this recruitment. But the last thing I'll add on Cure, Justin, how do you feel about this if you're looking at this as an Oregon coaching staff? Do you think that they would take Cure over Olesh, or where do you kind of view that? Because it seems like they would probably only take one more now that they have Ploog.
Yeah, it's probably going to be first come, first serve. Those are both really good players. I think you're talking about the number 1 and number 3 tight end nationally. Might be number 1 and number 2. Either way, you're talking about 2 elite guys. Cure's a 5-star, but Olesh is like a fringe 4-star guy. So he's up there too. So, I think it's with Ploog committed, you're taking one or the other. And, I guess maybe a slight preference to Cure possibly, but again, you're really grasping straws at that point. So yeah, get one of these guys if you can. And I wrote about this. If you don't, there's a transfer portal. There's going to be great tight ends in there. They're all going to be lining up to come to Oregon. And one thing that I will note here that could be a difference maker with this visit with Cure coming for the Washington game. Okay. I don't want to look ahead, but I'm not a coach, so I can. Oregon could potentially be finishing that Washington game 12-0 and the Big Ten champs. There's going to be a lot of emotion in that locker room after the game, like that you're going to feel firsthand, like, whoa, this is what this feels like. This is pretty amazing. So that's something that I think potentially tips in Oregon's favor as well here.
That's a good note for sure. So we'll continue to track all the developments on Lincoln Cure's visit over at ScoopDuck.com. And before we get into any more recruiting coverage, Justin, want to give a quick shout out to Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try the homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Max Torres and Justin Hopkins here with you on a Tuesday morning. Glad to have you along. Thank you for tuning in to the Ducks Dish podcast. Justin, let's keep it rolling in the 2025 class as we talk about some more recruiting here. A little bit of a surprise visitor. I kind of hinted about it in my reporting throughout the week last week, but one of the big names in the 2025 class that made the trip across the country for a visit with the Ducks is 2025 Auburn linebacker commit Elijah Melendez out of Kissimmee, Florida, Osceola High School. Pretty big development here, seeing that the Ducks are still looking for a linebacker in the 2025 class. And it seems like Melendez is now a big name to track, along, of course, with Caleb Burns, the Baylor commit out of Texas. So what do you make of Elijah Melendez taking this trip out to Oregon?
Well, you keep turning over every stone that you can turn, right? If you're Dan Lanning, this is one that, kind of as we now have it unfolding a little bit. This is a guy Oregon's been working on for a while. This isn't like they reached out last week and on Monday and on Friday he's on a plane. This is somebody they've been recruiting. Obviously, if you do visit Oregon, I think it says a lot. I reached out to him, was able to confirm the visit, and Melendez did give me the green light to share the visit news because I know Oregon was kind of bringing him in under the radar, hoping to work on him. And, so I think that's a good sign. He didn't want to talk about the visit. He didn't want to go into what he called what else I have planned. So it sounds like there's maybe potential that he'll be taking more visits. And to me, if this Auburn commit is taking other visits, it kind of signals that maybe he's open a little bit. And let's be honest, Auburn's not very good at football this year, right? They have not had a good year. They have not looked good. So I think that's opened the door here a little bit. And I do think there's legitimate interest between these two parties. So this is a guy that, to me, looks exactly like what Dan Lanning recruits at linebacker. This is a guy, this is not a backup emergency plan. This is a guy, when you watch the film, when you look at him, and the way he moves sideline to sideline for a guy his size really fits what they like to have at linebacker. So I would keep an eye here. Obviously, we don't have quotes to back it up, but That's a late season visit. And shoot, man, I don't know. Maybe you can get him back between now and signing day. I don't know, but that would be even better. I don't know. I'll have to do some digging. If he's going to sign early, if he's not going to sign early, maybe what, his plans are there. And then, we can continue to talk about this recruitment, but it's a nice name, 4-star guy to put on the board and just kind of see how things play out here in the next few weeks.
And his recruitment hasn't been without its own twists and turns, Justin. He was originally committed to Mario Cristobal in the Miami Hurricanes, but decided to flip to Hugh Freeze and the Auburn Tigers back in September. So Oregon and Florida, more momentum than they've had in recent years right now, right? Of course, Dallas Wilson, Zaire Addison. Wow, that was a huge hit. I got to run that one back if you're watching us on the ScoopDuck YouTube channel, you guys. He's listed at 6'1.5", 224 pounds. So he's a guy who definitely has some juice to his game, and Oregon needs linebackers. So if this guy's willing to hear you out and obviously make the trip across the country, it's someone that I think we got to monitor between now and the early signing period. And if he does take more trips, or if he does talk and do interviews and at other schools or with other, sites or anything, maybe someone in the On3 network, you never know. But that's kind of the main names that I had, Justin, and I wanted to get to some football talk here with the team prepping for Wisconsin. You cool wrapping with recruiting, or do you want a little bit more?
No, that was the main points. I think you had one more to get to, and I'm going to throw it to you, but it's Jared Curtis, the 2026 quarterback that visited Oregon. Obviously, a number one quarterback in his class, elite guy. And I know previously you'd mentioned Oregon as a leader with, some of the national On3 reporters, but it sounds like, Oregon's certainly in the mix, but he was maybe a little more hesitant this time to come out and just say, yeah, Oregon's my leader. Everybody's chasing them. So, but it sounds like things went well for him in Eugene.
Yeah, so I was able to get an interview with Curtis fresh off of that visit to Oregon over the weekend for the Maryland game, and he's freshly back on the market after announcing a decommitment from Georgia. So the trip went well. I know he spoke very highly of his relationship with Will Stein as he navigates this recruiting process a second time around, and he said that the craziest thing that shocked him was the atmosphere at Autzen Stadium, and he got to spend time with Lanning, Stein, as well, and just some other GAs. So I think Oregon's in a good spot there. He was accompanied on the trip by his dad, so it was his first time that his father got to meet Lanning and Stein, and they got to know each other a little bit more. And then I guess the big update from that is that he kind of confirmed that Oregon is going to be taking 2 quarterbacks in this 2026 class. That was something that I was able to ask him about during the trip, and he said, quote, they said they would take 2 quarterback commitments in 2026. And then I asked him, I kind of followed up in that interview saying, how do you feel about being a part of a 2 quarterback class hypothetically? And the quote that a lot of our readers liked over at ScoopDuck was, it wouldn't really bother me if it was 4 quarterback commits. Continuing, quote, anywhere you go, you have to compete. So just looking forward to it. So Oregon did a good job here with Jared Curtis, getting him on campus. I think doing it with that recent decommitment certainly bodes well for them. But yeah, he said that he didn't really have a leader right now, doesn't have a timeline. But what I can tell you is that he's going to be taking a couple more trips to round out the month. He's going to be back in Athens this weekend as Georgia takes on Tennessee. Then he'll go to Ohio State when they take on Indiana before rounding out the month in Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl when the Crimson Tide take on the Auburn Tigers. So not anything huge really coming from that visit, but I think Oregon solidified themselves as a great spot for him and someone to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, and I do like what, the quotes that you got from him about really, just kind of being aware that there's other quarterbacks coming in, right? Oregon's got a 25 commit. They've got one, potentially could flip another one and add Jaron Kiwe Sagapulitele. And then, of course, Oregon's got a 2026 commit in Jonas Williams. Jared Curtis would then be the second commit in that class alone. So he's at least aware, and Oregon's made him aware, like, hey, look, we got guys coming in. And I love that he's basically saying, hey, I'm not afraid to compete. So there's no doubt in my mind that the other schools are going to try and use that against Oregon and say, hey, look, you can come here and be the guy. I'm sure that'll be a thing. But, if you're Oregon, all you can do is say, hey, look, come here and prove that you're the best. And if you are, you're going to lead a really good offense and a loaded team, and we'll see where it takes us. So Love the approach, and I just think originally I know it was a big deal that Oregon was the leader, and I was always kind of like, well, okay, that just sounds like Oregon's maybe got a slight edge on somebody, but I think there was I felt like there was going to be some time left before he made a decision, and it sounds like that's the case.
It does. It does. I don't think he's going to make a decision in the near future. He kind of just said that he wants to get back out to all the schools that he's interested in and see them again. So we'll just keep tabs on that. And over on ScoopDuck, you guys, it's not always interviews and stories and everything. Sometimes I'll drop little nuggets on the message board, and we have an incredibly active message board. So come and see us, come hang out and talk some ball, and subscribe to ScoopDuck.com. Justin, let's shift to the football team as the Ducks prepare for a road trip out to Madison. I know you're going to be heading out to Wisconsin for the game as well. Not a terribly eventful press conference from Dan Lanning on Monday evening, but we do have a couple of updates and notes nonetheless. And I think the most notable one really kind of comes around Jordan James and Jordan Birch, as the Jordans were banged up a little bit in last week's win out in Eugene over Maryland. But the quote to pass along from Lanning is, quote, "We'll take it day by day this week and continue to evaluate that, but I anticipate both of those guys being available." So what can you say about Jordan Birch and Jordan James potentially being good to go for what could shape up to be a tough road game? I mean, that's not a toss-up out there in Wisconsin.
Well, the immediate press conference after Maryland, Lanning made it sound like it was mostly precautionary, with both kind of electing to hold them out of the rest of the game. As we know, James only got that one carry in the second half and never really returned. And then, of course, he backs that up Monday evening with basically saying, hey, looks pretty good. We're going to track it, see where it goes. So it sounds positive. I think, if anything, maybe they missed this game, and that's the worst case scenario, right? Maybe they missed this game. You got to bye. They're back for Washington. I think Oregon should be able to beat Wisconsin without Tez Johnson, Marcus Harris, Jordan Birch, Jordan James. The likelihood is that they will not be without all four of those players. So I think you feel pretty good. You do understand that Oregon can win even if all four of those guys can't play. Again, I think that's unlikely. The good news is you got to bye after that. Then you have Washington. I would say there's a really good chance. I would say there's a great chance that you're at full strength for the Washington game, or worst case, probably only minus Tez Johnson. So overall, you're looking really healthy if you're Oregon entering what is about to be the very, very key stretch of your season.
And with Oregon facing Wisconsin this week, it really feels, Justin, like this team needs that bye week just to rest up and heal up. So while the on-field product hasn't looked stellar all the time, I think you are getting some really key reps for some guys like Kavika Rogers and Dave Iuli, who Lanning was asked about as they fill in with Marcus Harris at right guard with him being injured. And he said, quote, "I think they both have different strengths and weaknesses. I think they can both play winning football and have earned the opportunity to play." So I did see someone on ScoopDuck say that I think Iuli or Rogers actually might have had the snap edge. I can't remember. One of the two. Was
Iuli played more than Rogers? Yeah, he definitely did.
Okay.
And that's good because that's his first live game action all year. So, I mean, if Dave Iuli, they trust him in game one that much, against a decent Maryland front, I think it's good that they appreciate that. And again, if you're talking about Marcus Harper, maybe he misses this Wisconsin game, and I would not be shocked at all if he's back for the Washington game. So getting those two guys the reps and then bringing Harper back and maybe having the luxury of not having to play him every snap all game long, that's a winning combination for Oregon.
And then just one more note on Wisconsin as we kind of just dive into some more talk about them ahead of this week. So they're coming off the bye. They just lost 42-10 to Iowa. So not the best team, clearly. But I know you were writing on ScoopDuck that you think Oregon could be in for a little bit of a dogfight potentially. So I just kind of wanted to get some of your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be similar to Maryland, right? Maryland had that bye week to prepare for Oregon. Wisconsin has that same bye week to prepare for Oregon. And again, you were just mentioning it, alluding to it a moment ago. That's Oregon's 8th straight conference game coming up, right? That's a lot of football in a row with no break. So that bye week coming up for Oregon could not be any more welcome for Dan Lanning, I'm sure. And at this point, you're really all you're looking for, like literally all you're looking for, is to get to 11-0 on Saturday and come out relatively healthy. So, if that's kind of the name of the game. I know that as fans or as Vegas betting odds, you see, okay, Oregon's a 14-point favorite or whatever the case might be. Oregon should dominate them. And you're right. That was a really bad loss to Iowa, 42-6 to a terrible Iowa team. They're talking about quarterback changes and stuff in Wisconsin. Clearly things need to get better there. And I've said this already, and I'll say it again. This is now their Super Bowl. Their Super Bowl is having a chance to beat number 1 ranked unbeaten Oregon at home. And so, I mean, the fans are going to bring it. They're going to. It is a raucous stadium. It's going to be live. I'm excited to be there and check it out myself. But yeah, I mean, Oregon, all they need to do, and I'm sure they've gotten their ass chewed this week because let's be real, Oregon didn't really play that great against Maryland. Like, it was good enough, got the win, all that's great. But if we're talking about the standard, that really wasn't the standard. So I'm sure Dan Lanning gave them a pretty good ass chewing, or continues to this week during practice. And we'll just see if it lights a fire in Oregon. But under no circumstance should they lose this game. But again, expect Wisconsin to be prepared, a little more rested, and they're going to come out with a game plan that's specific for Oregon because they're going to have 2 weeks to prepare for the Ducks.
Oregon knows they're going to get everybody's best shot, and why would we expect anything different this weekend when they travel to true Big Ten country in the Midwest at Camp Randall for that Wisconsin game? Justin, wanted to just sprinkle in a couple of quick notes here on some hoops, because Oregon basketball has both basketball programs have begun their seasons, and I think most notably Kelly Graves and the Oregon women's team off to a 3-0 start, got a big win on Sunday against number 12 Baylor in Eugene, 76-74 win for the Ducks, and that win has vaunted them into the top 25. I think they're right there at number 25, so that was a big win for them. And then Dana Altman and then the men's program, they're off to a 2-0 start, and they'll host Portland tonight in Eugene. So overall, pretty solid start to the year for both programs. But I think really with the women's team and that win over Baylor, that's just huge for Kelly Graves and for them to kind of get some early momentum in the season and maybe, I don't know, a marquee win.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's be fair about what that means for Kelly Graves. I mean, obviously he's entering this season with, mixed expectations or mixed emotions, which is tough to say. I really like Kelly Graves, but the last couple of years have been really difficult to watch. It hasn't been good basketball. So he was active, hit the transfer portal, got a big win in the transfer portal. And, you heard him in the post game and he said, hey, look, we were preaching to the girls that, hey, you're going to have to buy in. We got to do our things, but we got a team here. Let's go. And obviously, of course, you're 2-0, but the first 2 games didn't mean much. You go and beat Baylor. It was a good Baylor team. Baylor played a pretty good game. It's not like you just caught them sleeping. That's a big win. And that for Kelly Graves, with a lot of newcomers to the team, mixing in with some of your originals, that really galvanizes a team like this for him to have a chance to say, okay, now look, I told you what we brought together worked, and here we go. So I'm not saying this team's going to go unbeaten. That's totally unfair, but it certainly looks like they're going to be competitive. And that's really all you can ask for, at least in the early phases of the season. And then, as for the men's, obviously, still got the perfect mark so far. Really like that they're getting a lot of bodies out there, rotating through a lot of guys. There seems to be a lot of depth. And there seems to be a lot of different combinations that Dana Altman can use, whether he wants to, go big or maybe run the floor a little bit more and mix and match in pieces. So to me, Oregon men, I don't care if they're 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 2-2, whatever. I think if you're Dana Altman, you're experimenting what's your best 5 out there, and then maybe who those first 2 guys off the bench are. And that's what this phase of the season's all about for the men.
It looks like we're waiting to see Supreme Cook make his season debut with the Ducks. Saw a report that said he was questionable for tonight, so we'll keep an eye on that one. I'm hoping to watch some more Oregon hoops this year. I mean, I'm always so locked in on football and recruiting that I don't watch as much of that as I would maybe want to. But there's a lot of great sports out there, and basketball is certainly one of them. So it'll be fun to watch. That'll do it for us, I think, on today's episode of the pod. If you want to find more Justin, you can find him on Twitter/X at JHopkinsSD. Find me on any social media platform at mtorresports. Like the video and subscribe to the ScoopDuck on the YouTube channel. Help us get to 2K. The support has been tremendous, and we love talking about the Ducks and engaging with you guys. So make sure you do that. Come and check us out at ScoopDuck.com and share the show, share the Ducks Dish podcast with everybody you know, maybe especially some Duck fans. But that'll do it for us. Until next time, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.